Welcome to Problematic Woman, a show that showcases strong conservative women, current events, and calls out the hypocrisy of the so-called feminist movement. I'm Bree Payton, staff writer at The Federalist.
And I'm Kelsey Harkness, a producer with The Daily Signal and also a contributor to The Federalist. Today we have a big lineup for you. We're going to be talking about Kylie Jenner, who is pregnant, and how Lena Dunham is triggered by that. We're going to talk about Megyn Kelly's Today Show Rocky debut. And we're going to, of course, play real or fake news. We're going to hit on the fact that Saudi Arabia in 2017 finally is lifting its ban on women driving. And, of course, crown our problematic woman of the week.
But first, Michelle Obama, during a marketing conference in Boston, said that any woman who voted against Hillary Clinton voted against her own voice. Let's watch.
Quite frankly, we saw this in this election. As far as I'm concerned, any woman who voted against Hillary Clinton voted against their own voice in a way, to me, that is, to me, it doesn't say as much about Hillary, and everybody's trying to wonder, well, what does this mean for Hillary? No. What does it mean for us as women? That we look at those two candidates as women, and many of us said, that guy, he's better for me. His voice is more true to me. Well, to me, that just says you don't like your voice. You like the thing we're told to like. The voice we're told that we're supposed to like.
What are your thoughts about all this?
I think this comment is incredibly demeaning to women. I actually think it's comments like these that led women, and men for that matter, to vote for Donald Trump. We don't need women telling other women who to vote for. It's very similar to a few feminists who come to mind, Gloria Steinem and then Madeleine Albright during the campaign received a lot of flack for telling women that if they don't vote for the woman, Hillary Clinton, they're voting against their own voice. But I want to point out one other thing that I find hypocritical about that statement. I'm pretty sure back in 2008, Michelle Obama was campaigning for her husband, telling women to vote for a man, her husband, over the exact same woman she's talking about here. So I think it's incredibly hypocritical.
Yeah, it's completely ridiculous. And also, recently Hillary Clinton said in an interview when she's been promoting her weird book, said that, I'm sure a lot of women who didn't vote for me faced a lot of pressure from their boyfriends and their husbands and their brothers to not vote for the girl. I think we all know that the main reason why women decided not to cast a vote for her was because of her stance on numerous policy issues, including her very extreme stance on abortion, which, quite frankly, a lot of women just don't agree with. An overwhelming majority of Americans support the Hyde Amendment, the very thing that she was stumping on college campuses, saying that she would repeal and get rid of the second she was elected in office. So I think we need to keep in mind the fact that, women aren't trying to strangle themselves with their own voice by exercising their constitutional right to vote. It's that she was a really bad candidate.
Well, I think we all would love to see a female president. I know I would, but when it comes to women and who they vote for, they don't vote for someone simply because she is a woman. Moving on, though. Lena Dunham said her infertile friends were triggered by the fact that Kylie Jenner is now reportedly expecting. In a tweet, she said, a solid 10 friends
work done, which I think is
triggered by Kylie's pregnancy. I'm like, ladies, she's 20. We were all very fertile then. We were just broke. So I just need to get this straight. Is it now because these women in their 20s were broke that they got abortions? Is she excusing their abortions because they're broke?
So there's a lot to unpack here. And I think, first of all, we need to acknowledge the fact that dealing with fertility issues is very challenging. My own parents couldn't conceive for a number of years, and they had a really hard time, having me. And I know a lot of other couples experience that. And I'm sure, other people having news, it's difficult to hear when you're going through something like that. But at the same time, I mean, things that are happening in the outside world aren't necessarily happening to you, right? And I think a lot of times people sometimes have a hard time of seeing the difference between those two things. But also, I think that the economic aspect of this is rather interesting, right? She says, oh, when we were 20 and we were all broke, we were all very fertile back then, which she's not wrong, right? When you're 20, you're much more fertile than when you're 35. And I think the economic component also brings up a really interesting point, which a lot of pro-life advocates, like the ones over at the Human Coalition, repeatedly say, which is the #1 causal factor for women contemplating or seeking abortions is because of economic stressors. They're worried that they can't take care of the baby. They don't think they can have the child and care for it properly. Therefore, they seek abortions, right? So I do think that there is an economic aspect to this as well, which she does acknowledge, which unpacks a lot of other issues too.
Well, as someone who has admittedly watched a lot of Kardashians in my days, I have to say, I think the Kardashians are a very pro-life, pro-family family, which I think is really interesting because there's so much that we could say negative about the family, how they're obsessed with money and fame. But I think that, if you look to the earlier on years in the show when Kourtney got pregnant, there was actually an episode where she talked about her decision to keep the baby. And I think that's sort of an inconvenient narrative for the mainstream media to point out the fact that this does appear to be a very pro-life family. Of course, we don't know if they have gotten abortions in their past, but we do know that there have been a number of times when they have been pregnant. Actually, Khloe Kardashian is reportedly pregnant as well. And they are all, excited about having children and being moms. And I think that really is an amazing thing.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you on that. And I think also we wanted to talk about Megyn Kelly.
We did want to talk
And
about
how she is
Megyn Kelly.
being a bit problematic as of late. So Megyn Kelly's new Today Show is off to a bit of a rocky start. Let's show you one example of a clip from her interview with Jane Fonda earlier this week.
You admit you've had work done, which I think is to your credit, but you look amazing. Why did you say, I read that you said you're not proud to admit that you've had work done. Why not?
We really want to talk about that now?
Well, one of the things people think about when they look at you is how amazing you look.
Well, thanks. Good attitude, good posture, take care of myself. But let me tell you why I love this movie that we did, Our Souls at Night.
So what are your thoughts? Do you think everyone's overreacting, or do you think that that was weird of her to ask Jane Fonda?
So first off, I'm a big fan of Megyn Kelly. I think she has had an incredibly successful career, and I hope that it continues to be successful. I will admit this was an awkward interview. She had a few awkward interviews during her first week over at NBC, although her colleagues there seem to be welcoming her with open arms and really supporting her and embracing her new show. This interaction was uncomfortable to watch. I do wonder though, did Jane Fonda, decidedly make it that way? Would she have reacted like that if Megyn Kelly hadn't worked at Fox News? And that I don't think we know the answer to. But I do think, this might be a little overblown, and she might be being a little. Megyn Kelly is of course problematic to the left, so it's not going to be easy for her to make this transition over to NBC. But I do wish her the best.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I do think that Jane Fonda was probably overreacting a little bit. I mean, she's been asked these kinds of questions repeatedly, and I don't know. You had an interesting point that we were talking about earlier, where you think that
Jane
women
Fonda
should talk about their plastic surgeries.
Yes, Jane Fonda, I thought I wrote it down. I believe she's 79. I hope I'm correct about that. If I'm not, I apologize. But
sorry,
Jane Fonda is not young, and she looks beautiful. She looks incredible. And I think that she does have an obligation to be forthcoming about the type of work she does if she wants to be honest to women and not promote fake, unachievable beauty standards. This is one of my critiques of the whole fashion and beauty industry and this whole celebrity culture, that they promote these unrealistic beauty standards that the rest of us are supposed to achieve. So I actually would have appreciated a much kinder reaction from Jane Fonda to that question, and maybe just talk about why she got plastic surgery. Hey, I got a little work done. I don't think any of us are going to judge her for that, but at least we know that when we're 79, we're not magically going to look like that without a lot of money.
Yeah, and with that in mind, let's play a little bit of real or fake news. Kelsey, I'm going to read you some headlines. You're going to guess whether or not you think those headlines are real or if they're fake news. Let's see how many you can guess. And also for all of you guys watching, let's see if you can do better than Kelsey. Try to guess which headlines are real, which ones are fake. Try to beat her. All right, so first headline. Street artists in Phoenix, Arizona paint a 50 mural of Melania to protest her anti-bullying campaign. Real or fake?
Man. I'm going to say real.
Womp, womp, womp. It's fake. It's 100% fake.
Oh, man.
Although it does sound real, right? Yeah. Everyone's hating on Melania for dumb things.
Just give it a few weeks.
Yeah. All right, next headline. Clemson students given heterosexual questionnaire in class. Is this real or is this fake?
So I don't even know what a heterosexual questionnaire is, but I'm going to say real because crazy stuff is happening on college campuses every day.
And you're 100% correct. This is totally real, and you can read all of the details over at Campus Reform. Okay, last one. The Daily Show investigates a $100 a month subscription service for white people who want to be woke.
Once again, I don't even know what a $100 month subscription service for white people want to be woke actually is, but this just sounds so ridiculous. I'm going to conclude that it's real.
Yes. Ding, ding, ding. It's completely real. So you can apparently, and there's different subscription levels to this, but it's called the safety pin box. So like, you know how Birchbox, they send you like beauty samples?
Okay.
The safety pin box sends you cards of information about like racial oppression and how you as a white person are contributing to the problem. So it'll send you informational cards, but then also the money that you spend on the subscription gets donated to organizations and charities and businesses that promote women of color. So that's really what this is. It's a money raking in scheme.
I was going to say, well, at least the money goes to a good cause, because that seems a little steep for a monthly subscription, but I don't know anything about those causes that it's going to, so I will bite my tongue until I read more.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem, some of them I think were like small businesses run by African-American women, so I think some of the money probably is going to some good use, but I don't know. I think like if you want to donate or give money to those causes, you can do so. I don't think you need a subscription service that includes white guilt to do that. Anyway, all right.
Anyways, there's an exciting topic that I want to talk about this week. This is something that really grinded my gears, I might say. So Saudi Arabia is finally allowing women to drive. And one organization in particular that you might think would be loud, cheering about this while also calling for many, many more reforms, has been completely silent. Who are they? This is no one else but the Women's March. I made a quick video. Here it is. The King of Saudi Arabia finally decided to end one of the world's most oppressive policies against women, issuing a decree this week allowing women to drive. In 2017, this is an incredibly big deal for anybody who cares about equality for women. So you'd think the Women's March would be front and center, congratulating Saudi women for this monumental achievement, while also calling for even greater reforms. But instead, they're silent. Not completely silent, though. In the hours after the king issued the decree, the Women's March found time to tweet about resisting Trump, Puerto Rico, and Twitter changing its character limits, a historically oppressive regime finally reversing one of its most discriminatory policies against women. Not worth mentioning, apparently. When women like myself chose not to participate in the Women's March this past January, time and time again, we were publicly shamed. If we didn't feel we need this march, we were told that we're privileged and devastatingly selfish. So in light of the movement's chosen silence on the recent development in Saudi Arabia, I have a message to those who scolded me. I didn't refuse to march because I think women are equal. I refuse to march precisely because I know that they're not. I'm aware that in America, being a woman isn't always easy. But I'm also aware that in America, I have rights that millions of women in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia still lack. In Saudi Arabia, for example, women need a male guardian's permission to marry, divorce, travel, open a bank account, get a job, or have elective surgery. In court, their testimony is worth only half of a man's. I could go on. Clearly, earning the right to drive is just a first step. So to those who chided me for being privileged, there's some truth to that. I couldn't be any luckier to be born in an age and in a country where I don't have to worry about my basic rights. But since I'm also aware that not all women are so lucky, excuse me for refusing to spend my time complaining about our own first world inequalities. That sounds selfish, now doesn't it? Instead, I'll complain about the inequalities my fellow sisters still face on a widespread international scale. I'll also celebrate these moments when women earn the right to take the wheel and navigate to a place where we can all safely complain about the smaller stuff. So because the organization that claims to care so much about women's rights isn't saying it, allow me in 140 characters or less. Congratulations to the women of Saudi Arabia for this great achievement. You deserve it, and I wish you many more. So clearly I had some thoughts on this, and there's actually been a development since I produced that video, which we have on the Daily Signals Facebook page if you want to share it and help us spread the word about the true colors of the Women's March organization. Since then, they have decided to also tweet a hashtag no Muslim ban in reference to Donald Trump's quote-unquote Muslim ban. And I thought this was a little bit ironic because they're apparently against Muslim bans, except if it's a Muslim country banning its own women from marrying, divorcing, traveling, or getting a job without a man's permission. Once again, so hypocritical. But I guess on a different page, the last thing I'll say about this is I think it's actually really sad that these human rights violations against women that are happening internationally could be issues where we as women could be uniting despite our political differences. I would think that, you know, the Women's March can come together with conservative women and actually have a voice and raise these issues, particularly when this happens in Saudi Arabia, and make a big deal about it and use this as an example of why they need to enact even more reforms on all these discriminatory policies they have against women. So I think it is a huge loss, a huge missed opportunity for the Women's March to be silent.
Yeah, and I think we can all agree that women should be allowed to drive. I actually got the opportunity to, the woman who wrote the book Daring to Drive, who led the movement in which women were just driving, you know, even though they weren't legally allowed to. She said that it was actually her time that she spent in the United States that kind of awakened her about this issue, right? So she was from Saudi Arabia, came to the United States, got her driver's license, was able to drive herself to and from work every day. And then when she moved back to Saudi Arabia, she wasn't allowed to do that anymore. She had to ask a male chaperone and burden male relatives in order to take her to and from work. She wasn't allowed to ride the bus even. I mean, you know, it's obviously very difficult and a very different kind of a life that a woman has in Saudi Arabia. And as you said, we can all agree that women should be allowed to drive regardless of what your ideology is. Right? So I think the fact that the Women's March is picking and choosing little things like this, deciding not to get on top of an issue that's so important, like women learning to drive, and instead politicizing Donald Trump's travel ban, I think it's very clear that they have a very specific agenda, and it's not really about empowering women, it's about using women to push liberalism.
Well, all I can say is thank God for these women in Saudi Arabia for deciding to be problematic women, because as we like to stress in this show, so often you're not going to make progress until you decide to be problematic. So we really do congratulate them and hope that many more reforms like this are on its way.
Yeah.
So moving on, we have a problematic woman of the week to crown.
Let's do it. Okay, so the Legends of Football League, formerly known as the Lingerie Football League, responded to the NFL this week by announcing that they stand for the national anthem because of the sacrifices made by America's heroes are far too sacred to protest. I think that these ladies are awesome, and as someone who comes from a family with a long-standing service, a lot of my family members served in the military and fought overseas. My grandfather fought in the Korean War, my uncle fought in Desert Storm, and my cousin went to Iraq and Afghanistan. He served 2 tours. I mean, you know, they risked their lives, and a lot of their friends around them, you know, got killed or injured or shot down in a helicopter right next to the Huey that my cousin was in. You know, I mean, a lot of men and women risk and lose their lives and injure themselves and lose life and limb in order to protect those colors, in order to protect the creed that is represented in the flag. And I think just to disrespect it in that way, it's not a political thing, you know, and it's not even making a nuanced political argument. I think if someone wants to wear a Black Lives Matter t-shirt while they're standing and putting their hand over their heart in reverence to the flag, I think that that's fine. But I think to disrespect it, I mean, disrespects all of us, especially veterans who have sacrificed so much.
Well, I think it's interesting to see if this women's lingerie football league gets more attention or more viewership or more attendance at their games because of this stance, because I think the free market and all these polls that keep coming out are showing that Americans really do want our flag to be respected. But I also will say, since we're talking about them, I'm curious your thoughts on this football league, because I will say I actually worked on a documentary. There's another women's football league that actually is more like the male version of football. They don't wear these little outfits while they're playing. They take it very seriously, and I know they're not huge fans of this other type of football where it's really, you know, focused on your body as much as it is about the game. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think if women want to run around in lingerie and play football, I think that that's fine and they can do that. And I think there's a lot of other sports that do this too, right? I mean, you have roller derby, you have women's wrestling in some cases, you have the gorgeous ladies of wrestling, which is a real wrestling thing and was a show on Netflix, which was a really good show. You know, so I think that this isn't anything new, obviously, and I think it's a fun way if women feel like it's more fun for them to wear lingerie and do a sport, you know, why not? More power to them.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for tuning in to yet another edition of Problematic Woman. We love hearing your feedback, so please leave us some comments. We'd love to hear from you. If you have an idea for who should be crowned our Problematic Woman of the Week, we are always open ears. We always like to sign off with a fun, lighthearted video to get you excited for the weekend, which unfortunately we still have one more day to get there. But we're close. We're getting closer. And this one is from our girl, Charlene. If you haven't seen Charlene, I highly encourage you to follow her Facebook page. It's Charlene's World. It will brighten up your day every time she posts a video. But before we toss it to that, just want to say thank you for tuning in. I'm Kelsey Harkness. You can follow me on Twitter at Kelsey J. Harkness.
And I'm Bree Payton, staff writer at The Federalist and friend of the Daily Signal. You can follow me on Twitter at Bree_Payton and read all of my work over at thefederalist.com.
I don't have a bad attitude. I'll tell you what I do have, though. A bad job. That's what I have. Sometimes the sound of the human voice makes me just want to vomit. Isn't that crazy? Well, I'm on my mug when I was 19 years old. This is me. Now I'm 53. You think I really care? No. When I'm having a bad day, I need to be motivated. So I look at this poster. It just makes my heart feel so warm. Yes. You think I'm here because I want to be? No, I'm not. I could be home sewing. It's because we work together. It does not make us friends on social media. I'm just spilling my drink on you, Charlene. Sorry, I can't make it to the meeting. I have to go to my dad's recital. Come for your pizza. They say working will make your dreams come true. Seriously, I don't see any dreams. I'm not on a cruise ship. I used to have big dreams, but now all I have is a big sandal collection. Look what I have, isn't it neat? Won't you say my collection's complete? No. Look at this great view I have. Carol eating Cheez-Its all day, straight through. Carol. The sound of chewing when I'm trying to do lame work is way too much, honey. Get out of my life. Sorry I can't make it to the meeting. I'm in low power mode. I'm gonna turn off